Texas Tech wide receiver transfer Micah Hudson makes it official and picks Texas A&M. This is a massive addition to a room that desperately needed a new face.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On the show today, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking a little bit about Texas A&M new corner, Julian Humphrey, a Georgia transfer. We're going to talk about why Marcel has a lot to prove in the bowl game. And then we are going to start the show talking about none other than the most important addition of the transfer portal so far this offseason. And if I had to gamble, I would say that Micah Hudson ends up being the most overall important addition overall for the Aggies via the transfer portal. Micah Hudson is the perfect example of what Texas A&M needed in the transfer portal. Micah Hudson was a 5-star freshman last year, goes to Texas Tech. Out of high school, he picked Texas Tech. Of course, A&M was obviously in the discussion, and I remember distinctly, and I've said it on the show last week, when Hudson picked Texas Tech, I was like, have a feeling he's going to be over here next year. Kind of felt that way. And it's funny when things you predict actually happen, and that's kind of what happened here. Micah Hudson, hits the portal, makes the move, but of course then comes over to Texas A&M after a year at Texas Tech. And, at Texas Tech, the numbers they didn't jump off the screen at you, but the tape did. Because there's so much that he still has to grow. I mean, Micah Hudson is going to be a star. I mean, he only had 8 catches for 123 yards as a true freshman. But I'm just telling y'all, I mean, he's going to be a dominant force in this for this Texas A&M team. Texas Tech had a really good receiver in Josh Kelly. I mean, there were some good players on that roster where obviously, Hudson, a young guy, had a year, still got to play some snaps though. It's a little different than if he was a 5-star that we never really saw out on the field. And then he comes over to Texas A&M and all we have is high school tape and hope. We have some college tape where he did a lot well. I mean, obviously it was 8 catches, but you can tell by watching the kid play that there's a bright future ahead. And I have a feeling. So Spencer McLaughlin, our wonderful Locked On host of Locked On College Football Podcast, texted me last night and says, hey, what are your thoughts on Hudson? And he told me to give him a one-liner to describe Micah Hudson. I texted, Texas A&M is getting an NFL upside receiver that repairs a massive hole on the roster. He then said, wide receiver 1 on the team, ? And I responded, I still lean Noah Thomas being the guy, but that could change very quickly if Hudson develops. I lean Noah Thomas being the guy. I stand by that statement. I think I think Noah Thomas still has more room to develop. I don't think he's there yet. And I think that getting there is a really good player and a really good college player. I mean, once again, he's got that, he being Noah Thomas, has that frame to be a really good player at the next level, to be a really good player for the Aggies this season, this upcoming season, and he had a fine year this year. So, can Noah Thomas take from, what he had this year to what he's going to have? So let's pull up the exact numbers on Noah Thomas. I think he had, was it around 500 yards? Let's see. I forget now. He had 545 yards on 34 catches and 6 touchdowns. I think he can improve on those numbers. I think he can get those numbers up to 700, 800 yards, especially if Marcel Reed gets better and better and better and starts to develop more as a passer, which is something I think you're going to see happen this offseason. So Hudson, he's a guy that can create vertical threats. He's a guy that can be a possession receiver, but he can also be a deep threat. He is the definition of a do-it-all receiver, and he's a player that can come in, and we talked about it. For me, the number one concern on this Texas A&M roster that had to be plugged via the transfer portal was wide receiver. And it felt like you don't want to plug the wide receiver room with another handful of Cyrus Allens and, guys like that. They'll come in, they'll catch 20 passes for 210 yards, and they'll have a game here and there, and they'll help you out, and they'll help this roster a little bit. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be that guy that can win you football games. You need a guy that can win you a football game. And once again, and I know I keep harping on this name, but I think it's a great example because there's different – we talk about types of players in the portal. Micah Hudson's a different type of player than some of the receivers that I think Texas A&M is looking for. And, looking at a guy like – and I keep pulling this name up, but it's reality. Keandre Lambert-Smith, the kid that was going to go to Texas A&M or Auburn, picks Auburn. At first, I didn't think much of it. He then goes out, and he has the best receiving season for Auburn since World War II or something just absurd. Like, he has a great year. He could have been a massive difference maker for this Texas A&M team, but Texas A&M let him go. He goes to Auburn. Has a great year there, and Texas A&M is a team that just doesn't have a solid doesn't have that, and that to me is why Texas A&M needed to go get a player like a Micah Hudson. Now, Micah Hudson's different from a Keandre Lambert-Smith because there's not much college experience. Let's pull up the numbers on Keandre Lambert-Smith because I believe he had a massive year at Penn State. Not massive, but he had 673 yards in 2023 at Penn State. He had a big year. He had about 400 yards in 2022, 500 yards in 2021. So he's a proven can do it a lot wide receiver at Penn State. Also, it came from a big school. So like that makes you feel better too. So point here is this. Micah Hudson comes in, and he's a guy that is different from Lambert-Smith, and he doesn't really have that proof. All he's got is 8 catches for $125 or whatever it was. There's not a lot of proof that he's going to be great, but you just know that talent is in there. I mean, like, let me give you an example. Terry Bussey probably had very similar numbers, I'd say, to Micah Hudson when it came to receiving. Wright probably had about 10, maybe 12 catches. Let's see. Yeah, 13 catches for 179 yards. He also had, rushes and stuff like that. But point is, that's exactly what I'm talking about. If Terry Bussey, we've watched him play every game. We know who he is as a player. We know the upside there. If Terry Bussey transferred to another school, you look at the numbers and go, okay, well, but you know who Terry Bussey is and what he has. I think there's something similar there with Micah Hudson. I think that's a similar way of looking at it. The numbers aren't huge, but he's had flashes and proved that he can be an elite wide receiver. He just needs more opportunities to do that. And I think at Texas A&M, he's going to have the opportunity to do that. And the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to the addition of Hudson, this young core of Hudson, Terry Bussey, and Jerome Miles could be absolutely elite for the Aggies. Like, think about not next season, but the year after, when you've got junior year Bussey and Hudson and sophomore Jerome Miles. My goodness, that room is going to be bonkers. And that's kind of the point here is there's a lot of upside in this room and now on this roster that I really think is going to make this team better. So we begged for Texas A&M to go get an elite wide receiver, and they did it. Now, I'm not done yet. Go get more receivers. I still would like you to go get the more Lambert Smith type of player that's proven himself in college football, that had 750 yards last year at a legit school. Because we've gotten the guys, your Jabri Barbers and Cyrus Allen. The Jabri Barber, I believe in the upside, of him. But I mean, the players that come from Troy or Louisiana Tech and they put up 800, 900,000 yards, and then they get here and they're okay. You know what I mean? I'd love Lambert Smith is the perfect example of the player you want in the transfer portal at the wide receiver position. We got to find our very own version of that type of player because I think it could be huge for the Aggies. We are going to talk a little bit about Marcel Reed and why I think him playing well in the bowl game against USC is going to be very important for the Aggies. I'll tell you about that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. A lot of fun stuff to bet on the FanDuel right now. I think Saturday might be the best sports day of all time, okay? We've got 2 NFL games. We've got 3 college football playoff games. We've got great college basketball. Could you ask for a better sports day? And where better to watch it and bet on it than on FanDuel? Let me tell you, there isn't a better place. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So Marcel Reed and the Texas A&M Aggies are getting ready to take on the USC Trojans in the Las Vegas Bowl. Comment in. Okay, I want to hear 2 comments. I want to hear 3 things in the comments. Who's going to the game in Vegas? How much money are we taking to gamble? And what are we playing? Blackjack, slots, baccarat, craps. Want to hear in the comments. Want to hear all those things. I really want to go myself. I'm trying to talk myself into it, but let me know those things in the comments. In this game, it's going to be a weird game knowing Miller Moss is gone and, he's just left and committed to Louisville. And so I don't think Texas A&M should have any trouble winning this game. It's kind of the new reality of the playoff is kind of, the New Year's Six Bowls are kind of, they are gone for teams like Texas A&M. Now, obviously, they wouldn't have been in one, but it feels like you should, when you're not in the playoff, but you're kind of right there. It kind of feels, like, oh man, we should have been. So that, that's kind of the reality. But I think this game is a prime elite opportunity for Marcel Reed to give this fan base confidence that he is the guy, that he is the future, that he is going to be a great player. Based on what Texas A&M did in the transfer portal when it comes to going to get what's the kid's name? I already forgot. Jacob Zeno, the quarterback. That tells me that they for sure Marcel Reed's the guy. I thought that, we kind of had the conversation after the season. Is there any chance that Texas A&M might go after a legit dude in the portal and kind of have that, be someone that comes in and helps this team and stuff like that? And at the end of the day, I think they brought in Zeno to just be a veteran backup quarterback, which is a good thing. We talked about when he committed. I mean, if you really think about it, Texas A&M hasn't really had like that veteran presence quarterback. I mean, Jalen Henderson, Connor Wigman, Marcel Reed were all young guys. Miles O'Neill, young players. You're now going to have a veteran quarterback that's played a lot of college football in your room. And maybe he doesn't even touch a football in a game for the Aggies next season. but he can still help Marcel Reed, help the young quarterbacks, help Hart, help O'Neal, help the young quarterbacks on this roster get better and better and better. And, I kind of think that is what he brings to the team there. But when it comes to Marcel Reed and what I want to see in this bowl game, go out there, do exactly what you did against Oklahoma State in last year's bowl game. Obviously, he was kind of lunged into action because of the injury to Jalen Henderson. We weren't expecting him to have to go out and play, but he, of course, did end up going out and play, and he had a massive game that really kind of went, we think Connor Wigman's our guy. Like, we feel pretty confident that Connor Wigman's our guy at quarterback. But, hey, this Marcel Reed kid behind him on the depth chart is pretty darn good, and I think that you're going to see him maybe compete at some point and make it a little interesting in the offseason. And then, of course, Marcel Reed ends up winning the job. So I think this is a game for him to go out there. And I'm not talking about as a runner. We know who he is as a runner. He can run. He can move the ball with his legs. He's proven that. We know that. There's no concerns there. The question is, can he become a guy that we believe he can be with his arm? That, to me, is the number one most important thing for this entire football team this offseason, is can Marcel Reed develop as a passer? If Marcel Reed develops as a passer, I think that seriously, the upside next season for him and his football team is through the roof. His legs are a valuable weapon that make him just near impossible to game plan for. But it makes it easier to game plan for him when you know the threat of him throwing isn't all that great. If he can continue to get better and better and better as a passer, this team is going to be really hard to beat. And there's going to be, real conversations about the future of Marcel Reed and the type of play, just the upside is there for Marcel Reed. So what I'm saying is, I think this game, I talk about the get right game, you let Auburn be the get right game. Again, you need a get right game now to make you feel better heading into next season, give you a 9-win year, feel really good leaving this season, and the upside and the future of the program, the future of your coaching staff and Coach Elko and your quarterback. Go out there and Marcel Reed have a massive game. Throw for 325, rush for 80 yards, have 4 touchdowns against a USC team that we know doesn't entirely love to play this thing called defense. USC, let's go through the season, gave up 20, 27, 21, 24, 33, 29, 20, 26, 20, 13, and the 49 points. Actually better than I would have expected, but still gave up a lot of points in some games. So point there is, this team is liable to give up some points. Go have a massive game. Notre Dame against them, it put up 49 points, like I said. Riley Leonard had 2 passing touchdowns, had a $155 through the air, which obviously he's not a huge passing yards guy. He also had a touchdown on the ground. He had a total of 3 touchdowns in the game. Go have a big game if you're Marcel Reed, and just give this. It'd be exactly what happened with Nussmeier or with Nico over at Tennessee. You play well in your bowl game. Obviously, we've seen more of Marcel Reed than we saw those guys. You play well in your bowl game. You leave a great taste in the mouth of the fan base and college football analysts and stuff like that. And heading into the next season, people are going, man, this Marcel Reed kid is not being talked about enough. He's special. He's going to have a really good season. There's a lot of upside when it comes to Marcel Reed. I think that is the opinion and the taste you want to leave in the mouths of people. So if you go and play really well against USC in this game, it's going to be a positive for the future at the most important position on the field. We talked, like I just said a minute ago, I think the development of Marcel Reed is going to be the most important key detail of this offseason for Texas A&M. If you develop him as a passer, it's going to be really hard to beat this team in the future. So that is what I'm paying attention to in the bowl game. Want to see Marcel Reed have a really, really, really big game. Going to talk about the Aggies' most recent addition in the cornerback room in Julian Humphrey and why I think there's a player on Texas A&M's roster that's kind of similar in what Humphrey brings. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of college football playoff begins December 21st, starting at the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns. We can all root for that. In a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. So, the Aggies added a cornerback in Julian Humphrey, a guy that came over from Georgia. I read some thoughts on him from some Georgia websites. He was benched at times during the year. He was a starter to start the year. He, was kind of in and out of the lineup and benched at times here and there. But to me, Julian Humphrey is a player that is going to come in and be a great, great addition to your roster. I talked about how I don't think corner is going to be a position that you necessarily need to hammer in the portal. We knew that they were going to make an addition or two. And I think this is the perfect addition, knowing that you have a lot of good players. You have a lot of good young players. You have a lot of guys with upside. So you can kind of take a shot in the dark. And I think Humphrey is a guy. The guy he reminds me of is Scooby Williams. Scooby Williams, the linebacker for Texas A&M, was a highly ranked guy out of high school. And I think that you would say his career at Florida was okay. I don't think you could say it was elite. I don't think you could say it was great. I think you'd say it was okay. He comes over to Texas A&M, and we give the whole spiel. Hey, maybe a change of scenery, maybe a new place will be the difference maker for this linebacker in Scooby Williams. And he had a darn good year. And now we head into next season feeling really, really, really good about the upside of Scooby Williams. And I think that Julian Humphrey is a great example of exactly that. I think that he's a player that – is he elite? I don't know if I'd call him elite, but what I would for sure, without question, say is that he has a lot of upside, and he's a guy that's going to come in, and he is going to give you an extra body in that room with the upside of being an elite lockdown corner in this league. Perfect addition to me. And once again, we talk about Georgia's a hard place to play. Georgia puts a lot of elite players in the NFL. Sometimes there's really good football players that just don't always make it at Georgia. We see this a lot. And I think that him transferring to a new place could give him an opportunity to kind of prove that he is a player that has next level upside and can be a star player. He's been around college football for a while. He's a veteran. He's played a lot of snaps, and he's hung some banners and won some ships. He's done a lot right. So, the upside is there with Julian Humphrey, and I'm really anxious to see if he's able to kind of have that, career rebuild at Texas A&M like we saw with the Scooby Williams. I can't remember the name of that corner. I'm blanking now. The kid that came from North Carolina. Man, this is bothering me. Oh, was it Tony Grimes? It's funny how that felt like it was 8 years ago. Tony Grimes. Oh, it was Tony Grimes. That's so funny because it was like while he was just here last year, it felt like that was a million years ago. But kind of like what we were hoping for with Tony Grimes could happen with Julian Humphrey. So hey, I think you're kind of due to hit on that. So he's a player. I like the upside. Go check out the film on him. The film on Humphrey. It is solid. I think there's upside there, and I'm excited to see if he's able to carve out a role for the Aggies this season. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you all so much for being here every single day. Like I said, I always really, really appreciate it. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day today. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't already. Leave a like. Really appreciate it. And enjoy some Monday Night Football. We will see y'all tomorrow right here on Locked On Aggies.